Good morning from Easier Habits Live, your favorite 8 a.m. business live stream. I'm Alec from Easier Habits.
And I'm Meg. I'm a global English communication coach.
All right, and we're getting back into the swing of things. So today we're going to talk about what Meg learned from market research. But first, the communication tip.
Yay, communication tips. So I'm doing a live seminar presentation thing later today, and so much fun doing all the prep work for it. And I say that completely non-ironically. Like, some people are like, ew, gross, prep work for a seminar or something. I'm like, ooh, fun. I get to look at statistics and graphs and things. So for me, it's very exciting. But it is about communication in a global space. And it's so interesting, just the number of like stats that exist around language, its usage, native speakers versus non-native speakers. And so my tip today is more of a kind of informational thing. But did you know that of all of the conversations happening in the world at any given moment, only 4% of them happen with only native speakers of English? Which means 96% of conversations in the world happening right now have non-native speakers in them. Like, that blew my mind. Because, again, you know, we get in these echo chambers of the people we're around, right? We get used to the people we're around. We get used to the context in which we see them. We have a lot of shared experience. And I happen to live in the United States and associate mostly with English speakers here. And then realizing that there's so much more than that kind of opens your eyes at least to I don't want to say the broadness of this problem, because it's not a problem. It's just something that I think native English speakers need to be aware of, which is that, like, there's a lot of people out there for whom English is not their first language, and for whom English is difficult because it's a hard language to learn. There are so many different types of English, and we like to use, especially in America, lots of weird pop culture references and idioms and things like that. Earlier I used the phrase echo chambers, which right now is a very popular phrase being used in, I don't know, woke culture or something.
Generally, the idea that people are siphoned off into their own little rooms where they just get their own opinions and culture reflected back at them instead of hearing a variety of sources of information.
Yeah, exactly. And so when you're around certain people, you will reinforce those habits, right, of language usage. You just use the beautiful word siphoned. I love that word. But how many non-native speakers are going to know that word, right? And so when you are thinking about how to make your English more approachable, I was thinking of like specific action items. And there's some people who take it to the extreme. Like, there's this whole thing called Globish that it's hilarious. But it pares down the English language into like 2,000, 2,500 words, where you can only communicate with those words and certain grammar structures, which I feel is a little too confining for most contexts. But that when you think about the English language, even though we've got tens of thousands of unique words in our language, 92% of the language is made up of less than 2,000 of those.
Yeah.
So focus on those words. And I know for us native English speakers born and raised in places that really value like English education, it was all about sounding smart and using big, fancy words to be pretty and have beautiful language. And there is a time and a place for that. But international business meetings, that's not the time nor the place, right? To use beautiful, flowery language. That is the time to use practical language that people can understand, right? So you don't want the beauty of your language to hinder the understanding of your audience. So I guess if I were to boil it down to one thing, think about the English that your audience probably knows and will relate to, and use that.
And or learn Globish.
Globish! English.
So,
Yeah, it's so cool.
Never heard of that before.
Yeah, it's a Jean-Paul something French. Sorry, French people. Another fun fact: French is the language with the largest proportion of non-native to native speakers.
I can believe that.
Yeah, so there are very few French native speakers, quite a few non-native speakers.
Yeah.
Which I thought was hilarious.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, it's just things to be aware of, and that's just the linguistic aspect, let alone like the cultural aspects and all those things.
Yeah. Be I don't know if the mic picked that up.
We're still a little psychic, kind of. Whee!
So Meg whispered, be aware, and I whispered, be very aware. So anyway, but getting back into the swing of things, I did not get fully into the work of things. Today I am going to start dipping my toes in that. I think it was just yesterday was the first night where I didn't feel like I'd exhausted all my resources by like 7 p.m. And so
that's impressive.
And so I made it to a regular bedtime without like taking a 7 p.m. nap.
Yeah.
And so that is a sign like, all right, maybe aside from a few random coughs and whatnot, I'm ready to jump back into the swing of things.
Nice.
But you were researching yesterday, so
yeah.
I'd love to hear about some of the things you mentioned. You both mentioned patterns you found in the market research you did looking at competitors and also gaps. But before that, I want to ask you, how did you find your competitors? How did you select them?
That was fun. Okay, that was a lot of questions all at once.
Sorry. So that was kind of like a table of contents. Let's back up. How did you select your competitors?
Okay. So, and I'm going to take a step back anyways and give a little bit of context for this. So, again, as you can hear, I'm like still sniffing. Got all this post-nasal drip. Trying to get back into work yesterday, really being the first day I actually did anything measurable in almost a week. And I wanted to find something to be as productive as I could and really make sure that time was valuable. And although there's 1,000,000,005 things that I need to be doing right now, the thing that we are really focusing on right now is getting me clients, right? That is the prime focus. And so in order to do that, we have paid a little bit for a marketing research consultant marketing consultant, not market research, to help me get everything together. And, just with one of the most basic packages, starts with a questionnaire where you talk about your business, your ideal client, and a bunch of other things. And one of the things on there asked about, who do you admire in your sphere, or who are your competitors? How, what do they offer that's different from you, or what can you offer that's different from them, and things like that. And although I know a lot of people in the global education space, right, I don't know all that many people specifically in the English for Japanese business people space. And so I had to do some research into that. And I did it in two different ways. First, I did an English search and searched for, business English coach. Searched for all of the things that I would want to kind of search for myself, right? Mm-hmm. So natural business English, business English pitch consultant, coach, and putting in different things to see what came up. And I got pretty much the same lists of like a dozen or so main websites that are either privately or kind of like a group or whatever owned. And got some ideas of basically just what exists in that space. There's a lot of kind of conglomerates of coaches where they'll pair you with a native and a non-native speaker and things like that, that have courses and other things, materials that you can do, subscriptions, etc. And then I did a search in Japanese for, again, the same types of things, just using the Japanese words. So, my business no 英会話 business English conversation, or Yeah, all those same terms in Japanese. And although I did get a lot of overlap, there were quite a few that showed up that hadn't come up in my English search. So that was kind of one of the first things. Like, I need to make sure that my stuff will come up in a Japanese language search, which means I need a Japanese version of my website ASAP, which is good. And it's a good thing to have learned. The patterns that I saw was I was looking at different types of pricing things, right? So most of what I've done in the past, again, has been kind of freelance, like, let's figure things out as we go along. I can do what you need and we'll figure it out, because people found me. I didn't have to go out with a specific package. They're just like, hey, can you help me with this thing? What's your hourly rate? Okay, sounds great. And I would be hired for an indeterminate amount of time. And that's what I was used to, but that is definitely not what is normal in this space, where most people prefer to have a set package. They want, the introductory package, or they want a 3-month course package, even if it's not a set course, right? It's the 3-month, these are the general goals that we're going to cover, kind of a thing, whether it's working towards a test or whether it is those types of networking conversations, working on pronunciation and things like that. So they have all of those different kinds of courses that you can then have add-ons if you want to do like private stuff. A lot of them were very generic, I will say, or generic in the sense that the person on that website doesn't know who they're going to get paired up with, right? It's just kind of a roll of the dice. To throw in a lovely...
So you're talking about teams, right? Specifically where it's a group of people that might support you, but you don't really, when you're signing up, you don't know who you're going to get as a coach or tutor or whatever.
Yeah, and that I'm sure they have some type of like matching up service or whatever, but I also get the sense that those places have relatively high turnover, because otherwise it would be easy just to put... Like, and some of the websites did. They'd have our team, and it's like a core team of 5 people, which was cool. And other ones just had lists of coaches that you could contact separately. So there were a few different ways to do it. One of the biggest things that I saw is there are very, very few white faces in this space. And by white, I mean Caucasian white.
Well, and what you're implying, I think you mean native English speakers from the US, or
so there's kind of two excuse me sorry, still sick. There's a couple of implications with this. So one is I do not know the level of English of these people. My experience has been most language teachers in Japan who look Japanese are not native English speakers and don't have native English level ability. They have really good English. They're great communicators. They can give you everything that you need and more when it comes to grammar and vocabulary and those types of things. But there are certain aspects of a culture that are really hard to explain or convey if you weren't either born and raised there or spent a significant amount of time studying or being there.
Yeah.
So again, I can't judge, any of these people specifically, but
there's value to being a non-native English teacher because you learned the language, so
yes.
you have that insight. But there's also value to being a native because you'll understand and know things that a non-native might, as long as you know how to articulate them, right?
And I actually recommend beginners go with a native speaker of your language, even if they're a non-native speaker of the target language, because they're going to know that beginning part way better than a native speaker of English. So like I can work with pure beginners, but it's hard and it takes a long time, and to get those really intense descriptions, it's just easier when I'm working with Japanese clients to do it in Japanese, but then Japanese is not my native language, and so doing complex grammar explanations in a language that's not my native one, it just opens a whole can of worms. I keep using weird metaphors. But that's not my target audience, right? I prefer working with the intermediate advanced people who are really ready to get into that deep, natural, what really matters, what doesn't, right? I know this like base level of English. How can I maximize that now? And then for the things I do want to improve on, what are those and how do we do that? And so just seeing as far as like the people that I found and the offers that they have, I mean, there are ones that are like, we'll get your TOEIC score, 200 points higher. And I'm like, I don't care about your TOEIC score. If you want a TOEIC tutor, that's not me, because I prefer like functional language. I want people to feel comfortable using the language, and a TOEIC test might get you a job, but it's not going to help you function at that job.
Right. Well, and if your target is like entrepreneur and businessmen, unless they're like trying to move from a Japanese company to a US one or something like that, they don't need that. What they need is the business communication. They're not looking to get a job. They're looking to drum up business for their job, right?
Yeah, exactly. So most of the things I found were, again, very much language focused rather than communication focused. And so in that, there was a great kind of entryway to the market there, showing or seeing how the websites were kind of structured. There was one that I was like, ooh, this guy's probably like super awesome, because he looks probably half Japanese, half something else. And his webpage is like this bold mustard yellow with a really stern picture of him like right in the middle. And like, business amazing, you're gonna be great kind of a thing. It's like grit, something grit with business English. And I was like, that guy knows what he's doing. That guy has a brand. And so, seeing that, but he was the only one that I can remember.
Do you have mustard yellow in your future?
I prefer turquoise and
but
blue.
I mean, that's great. I mean, just in terms of looking at the copy, if not like the individual colors, the style of the website, and like, the structure, where he puts content and kind of what order and how, all that stuff. So it sounds like you found a lot. It sounds like there are patterns. Gotta have a good package. Well, and what that does versus saying, keep a straight face,
Not gonna do
all right. But what that does, rather than just saying I offer my services at this hourly rate, that doesn't get you a sense of the results. And the whole idea of putting that into a package, even if that's like going to be highly customized and personalized, and you're going to be doing much of the same things, you could just say, hey, in this period, we'll get you these results. And you, again, when you're early on in a business, like go back to your previous clients to get, what are some of the results you've gotten from them. You could also, find studies on the types of practices that you could use to, as long as those, the results of those studies are roughly in line with what you can actually accomplish for people, you can do all of that. So would they feel less like they're just spending money and more like they're buying a particular outcome?
Yes.
Right? And
I do have clients that do just like, I have one, she's amazing and I love her, and she's like, Meg, I'm just going to take your classes for as long as, whenever, whatever. And, I give her a discounted rate because there's not a lot of prep work on my part, and she's amazing and I love her, and she's letting me stay at her place in Tokyo in February. So it's really wonderful. But most people don't want to do that. They don't want to have this kind of like amorphous, who knows how long this is going to last, right? They want to know, okay, this amount of time will be this time commitment and this amount of money.
Well, and that's an interesting thing where I see this in my own practice too, where there are people who are goal focused, but there's a lot of people who really are paying for the relationship. Like, in terms of, not like a creepy way, but in terms of feedback, they like the process, they like the feedback, they like the accountability, and really like, for these people, the process is the product. And I love that, because I mean that's more oriented towards like, how I think that's my whole brand, easier habits, right?
Me too.
But that's a hard market to sell to.
Yeah.
And maybe in the next few years, especially, is like a lot of society gets atomized. There are fewer, we've noticed there's like fewer gatherings, a lot of measurements just, of activity we had before COVID and after COVID.
Yeah.
And for example, in different areas, it seems subdued. There's less happening, less going on. And so, I think in the future, I would guess there's probably like people will probably find a way to crack the idea of selling, selling personal, like the personal relationship service.
Yeah.
But I don't see examples of people doing it well, or people realizing that's what they want. And I think eventually, like, we'll probably as a society will get to the idea that like, no, I want this kind of person in my life professionally, and I will pay for that regularly.
Well, honestly, I mean, I feel like that's been happening for decades in the fan community, right? In geekdom or whatever, there's people who have, like, people go to conventions and other things that celebrate something that they love.
Yeah.
There's like anime, right? There's the Anime News Network, and there's like so many conventions and cosplay and other things that people invest a lot of money into these things that it's just because they love it. They want it to be a part of their life. And they have this in Japan actually with like fan communities. People will be fans of someone, kind of like Patreon, right? Where they'll pay some, small subscription fee or whatever to be a part of the community.
The inner circle, more access.
Exactly. And I tried to do something like that last year, but I think I went too big. I went way too big too fast. And so kind of figuring out how to scale back and, make sure I have my offerings first. And then, if that fan community builds up, then sure, great. But
open that up.
It's a better thing to sustain, like past clients' ongoing interaction as opposed to like a kind of early buy-in of people, I guess.
Yeah. So, I mean, for right now, I think the thing that sells and people recognize and is easier to sell is the package. That was just a random future forecast that, like, in the future, I mean, people already do this, OnlyFans, actually, right? It's paying to have a relationship with someone, sort of, and that's broader, like things like super chats and whatnot outside of OnlyFans have grown. And like, there is that idea of like, oh, I'm paying to have this famous person read my words on TV or something like that to a bunch of other people.
So weird, but also like, kind of like.
And there is like, I have done it, done a small super chat once just to see it. I'm like, there is like, it feels weird and parasocial, and like I shouldn't be into that, but like there was an exciting thing about like hearing someone I like whose videos I listened to, who I liked, actually read my comment out loud. And so like I think people that craving for a relationship is happening. We just haven't gotten to the point where we're like, oh, I want this kind of like I don't just want a one-off, like parasocial many-to-one relationship. I'm willing to pay a premium to have a one-to-one relationship with someone who's going to help me instrumentally with this part of my career.
Yeah,
right? Exactly.
And I think actually I had something like that once. Like I was watching a live something, I think it's Hank or John Green, and I just typed something in the chat, and they like said a little bit of, someone asked about this thing, and then like they said my words, and I was like, yes, he just read my words.
Yeah. So anyway,
fangirling over here.
So relationships are powerful, but like as a service provider, trying to sell that is difficult unless you already have a fan base, right? That's the only way that's getting monetized, right? You produce content that brings a lot of fans, and then they want more access to you, and they start, start trying to, maybe even asking you for ways to get access to you, more access to you. And as your time is in demand and you can't just freely give it to them, you usually, start inserting a paywall by like, this content's in Patreon, or you commonly asked questions you put out as a video, etc. And so you don't have to answer them personally, etc. So, but yeah, there's that package piece. I mean, there's even though the people you're looking for are, intermediate to advanced English speakers, they're still searching in Japanese probably,
Yeah.
right? And so there's that, translating the Japanese website. Now you need to know what to put on that website.
Yep.
And so, some of these content ideas, like how people structure their packages, but other things, you're going to want to go back to the Japanese websites and piece out, what order do they put things in, etc. And probably what you're going to do is then write that in English, and then we can hire somebody to, like, a native Japanese English speaker to translate that. And you can, you're comfortable enough in Japanese to, like, proofread that and, like, make sure that that matches what you wanted to say.
Yeah.
But
if you find a good translator, though, then you build up this really good trust with them. And so I'm hoping, to have something like that.
Right.
In the near future. I'm not going to be able to talk for very much longer.
That's okay. I'm sure we can.
Although we have a viewer.
Hi. Yes, that's exciting. Welcome. If you have comments or questions, we have put them in the chat. We just talked about having this relationship.
Yay! And they're gone.
They disappeared. I think we scared them away.
Aw, we're a
little too needy.
It's all good.
All right. That was exciting. But for market research, so that was one thing, like the content, the pattern. But the other thing is you're noticing some gaps, right?
Yeah.
It's all about the English language learning and not the communication and business communication. Yeah. So that is a gap that you can. That will be unique to you and that will make you stand out. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing, you're cashing in on your white privilege. So, I mean, people looking for a native English speaker, all right? Like some of those Japanese faces may be native English speakers. Who grew up in the U.S. or whatever, and they just want to give back to Japan, or they have the skill because of their, maybe their parents, spoke Japanese in the house, so they're bilingual or whatever. Yeah. But, like, there is a thing where... where people looking for a native English speaker, there's all sorts of native English speakers that aren't white, but might be looking for a white face.
And that's one of the things, like, it's a little bit of a touchy subject to talk about race and gender and all of those things when it comes to, like, private coaching and consulting and things like that. And it's one of those weird things. I could do a whole other talk about this, but one of the things I kind of had to come to terms with and decide whether or not I was going to capitalize / like, not flaunt, but, definitely make it known who I am and everything. I happen to have, like, ridiculously huge eyes, especially when I put on eyeliner. They're like, I look like an alien. And large eyes are attractive in most Asian cultures. I have a very small mouth too, and I have a very expressive face. So some people are like, wow, you're like a living anime character. Which I'm not that cute. I wish I was. But, and there was a time when I was like, well, no, it doesn't matter what I look like because people should love me for my brain. Because my brain's amazing. And it is, but also why would I not use an asset that I have? And I say asset as, like, not, how do I make this sound not, like, sexual and gross? Like, I'm not, like, being like, hey,
this is our OnlyFans episode.
You might be able to get with me. I'm very happily married.
No, well, well, I think the part of it is just being aware of when and how you get attention.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it.
And the thing, I think, I mean, we talk about, being white. And the white privilege. I think an interesting thing people don't understand is when you assume, in the U.S., for instance, being white as a default, white, cis, hetero male or whatever, is these, kind of all of those things thrown as a default, right? And we assume that's privilege because you are a default. There are absolutely privileges that come with being a default, but it's really freaking hard to stand out, right?
True.
I mean, I remember in my 20s, I wore glasses more, but people would keep telling me that I look like any relatively skinny white guy with dark hair and glasses, right?
It's true. I looked, a thing.
And I would think, like, I don't look anything like this person, but it was just like, I was a generic default.
Yeah, so, it's true.
Right?
It's, you know, I like that in this Japanese space, I am different, and I can show, it's a very physical thing that I can set myself apart from all of these other people who have the same haircuts, the same black suits, the same, you know, like positioning and expression on their professional photos, because there's certain ways that people take professional photos in Japan and in, you know, Korea and China and whatever. But also, I take it the step back too, and I think about, why am I doing the stuff that I'm doing? Am I doing this so that I can get a lot of people to love me and shower me with love and attention and everything like that? A little bit. Not gonna lie, that's there. But that is not my primary reason for it. The reason why I got into languages in the first place was because I wanted it to be easier for other people. And I originally started learning languages with the intent of using those languages with other people so that they didn't have to learn English. Now, what I've found as I've gotten into the working world, English is just a part of life. Like 55% of the internet is in English. More than half of academic journals and studies are in English. It's the, you know, language of business. It's the language of the internet and trade and gaming and the UN and whatever. It's, all of these things use English. And so I can help people. If I know my language really well and I can get to know them and how they'll learn, I can help them learn better and be able to use their culture, integrate their culture, and remain who they are while using English as a tool.
Yep.
And so this is not about me in the end. You know, and as part of the questionnaire I was filling out, they said, you know, who would you like to, you know, be like? And I was thinking, oh man, I love, you know, like a good old Brene Brown, Glennon Doyle type, except I think, like, I don't necessarily want to be on stage in front of a bunch of people. I want to be that person backstage who is cheering on that person who's front and center doing something that's scary for them, that's hard, and that I can, like, show them how to do it and give them feedback so that they can continue improving on that.
That's not what your service is about, but, like, the hard reality to come to grips with is when you're attracting people to your market, you know, you have to make decisions about what you're showing them, when and how, right?
Yeah.
And if it is an asset for you to look like, because you look a certain way, if that's an asset, right, you're going to want to be one of those people. I mean, one, generally speaking with services, you want to form a connection with people. So, like, whether there's a particular value to your appearance or not, you want them to get to know you, right? You want to take a good picture that captures your personality. You want to be on video in front of them so that they trust you and want to work one-on-one with you and your services. So just generally, you'd want to have your face on things. But if you know in particular your appearance is something that's striking, that stands out, or that people are particularly looking for, then it's doubly important. Like, you should be aware of using that in your copy. I mean, I don't know if that extends to the point of using anime filters on your your ad visualization.
I actually did that for, I have, you know, one of those things that turns your thing into like a Disney princess or whatever. It looked kind of funny, but no, my stuff is mostly, I think these days it's all actual photos of me that if it's filtered, it's only for, like, lighting. So there's no, like, distortion or anything, because I made a promise to myself, like, 8 years ago or something, that I would stop editing all of my photos before posting them online. So you get to, you know, see my double chins and my wrinkles and stuff. They exist.
So these are all things you learned from doing market research. I never, and I guess, like, there's a part of me that should have asked about this, I guess I assumed, but, like, so why, like, this seems like new information. Why, like, had you done this before? Was it different this time, or is, like, this the first time you did it?
It was different because I was looking for something different. I was looking for people. I wasn't looking for services. So before I was looking for what the services were, right? And I knew what those were. This time I was looking for people in the space. And because I was looking for people, I found a distinct lack of people, which was interesting. I mean, when it was, it's been a while since I've kind of dived into this space. And so seeing how some of these websites have, updated over the years was interesting. And the different services, because there's always new things popping up here and there. But again, it was very specifically this coaching thing, right? Rather than, generic improve your English.
Well, and I think that shows a refinement. Like, coming back to market research periodically as you've learned more or have different questions is helpful, because at the end of the day, you're not actually trying to, really your competitors are not like agencies teaching English or like big online English learning communities. They're high ticket individual coaches or whatever. It's like that's what you want to be doing, so that's probably who therefore you're going to be competing against. You want to look at who's doing that, who looks like they're successful, right, who has attractive websites and whatnot that you would buy into, etc. And so that's a great reason to come back to doing market research, because I think a lot of reasons we don't get mileage out of our initial one or maybe even 2 or 3 versions of market research is it's really easy when you're new to an area to like not really understand who you're competing against and kind of go too general or too broad, right? I coached one person who was into immersive kind of cutting edge tech media, and this person wanted I was helping them draw the distinction between like, yes, in the end you want to be competing with agencies, but like right now as you start out, you can't offer the same services as those agencies as one person, right? You don't have a 10-person team behind you, right? You don't have that kind of money. And so really when you're starting out and developing your initial package and figuring out who you are competing with, you're gonna have to find individual people, not agencies, to compete with. And that was again an example of like, sure, that's great, like 5 years down the road, where you want to be building towards, but if you're actually looking at who you have to compete against now, it's a different set of people. So and that just kind of takes perspective and or feedback to get to. This was prompted by marketing questionnaire, which was really helpful. And I should reach out to him and actually ask him if we can have a conversation maybe for the group. I know a lot of people are interested in our video what we learned from a market consultant call, so maybe we can involve him a little bit more.
Oh, that would be so fun.
Yeah, that'd be good. So business tip. This is something we were talking about last night. We, like many people, especially like middle class or like conservative, we want to save money. And we don't want to spend money until we're making a lot more money, and so we've flipped this now with this 6-month perspective a little bit, in the idea of like, we're not going to spend money we don't have, but really we want to invest as much as we can into Meg to be successful first, like launch her stuff, get that good to go, which is a mindset switch for us. And she was kind of mentioning last night that Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Poor Dad?
Oh, no, Ken Honda, actually.
Oh, Ken Honda, okay.
Yeah, so not Rich Dad Poor Dad, Ken Honda, Happy Money. The
Happy
idea
money,
of, like, you don't keep your money just to keep it. You have money to use it and to circulate it, and then it actually comes back in even more, and
That idea that there's like a value in investing, like a psychological value to investing yourself, which I know that's true because I see the difference actually between coaching clients and that pay me, and then I've done stints volunteering, and like the people that I volunteered with this one program for like Nigerian entrepreneurs.
Oh yeah.
And like I didn't even know if he was listening to me. Like he very rarely did the things that I was asking for. And at the end of that, he asked me for money. And I'm like, I don't think you understand at all what this program is for.
Yeah.
Right? Like anyway. And so, I have zero confidence he learned anything. And there's a couple of times I've done this in with US based groups as well. And I had the one client experimental media one, actually, who took that very seriously and like took off. But for a lot of other people, they just didn't learn a lot because they weren't investing in themselves. Like, they were just getting a free service, and they were consuming it like you would consume a YouTube video that's free, right? Rather than actually as something they're taking seriously, which is very different from my paid clients who follow up every week, have questions, like burning questions to ask me, and all of that. Like, it's very different. So like there is a psychological aspect to investing in yourself, but the other thing too is that if you have a habit of investing in yourself, not all of those investments will pay off. Just like if you have a diverse portfolio, not all of those things are going to be making money. But if you're investing in enough things, you're going to find the things that do pay off. So like specifically, you've mentioned that like you have ADHD, right?
Yep.
And so
ADHD.
And sometimes you wouldn't even know, because she's, like you really can focus on particular things, which is true of ADHD people. They can really focus in on the things they're interested in. Hyper focus. But one of the things we're thinking about is like there's research on neurofeedback, which is like reading your brain waves, and ADHD. And it's not conclusive, but like it's supportive in the right direction. And we're talking about like now more than ever, there are these cheap headsets, relatively cheap, few $100s, headsets, so you could do neurofeedback at home. You don't have to go into a lab or whatever, like when we were kids, right? And we're talking about like, is this worth it? If it, is this worth it to try out? Yeah. And that particular investment, we're like, we don't know if it's going to work. Should we spend money on it? And then when I went back and thought about it, it's like, well, what are the other things we could do that we haven't tried already that would help you? Yeah. And it's like, well, we haven't really done this. And it could. Pretty much everything else that I could think of, you've tried in some form or fashion, right? Yeah. And it's like, we could try different forms of meditation. We could try and really lean into that. But this also, like, it has the feedback aspect of it, which is something you don't really get from meditation, not directly, right? Yeah. You kind of, over time, slowly may find your thoughts clearing or being more focused, but you don't have like instantaneous feedback. The feedback cycle is much longer, which makes it much harder to learn, which is pretty much true of anything.
And it's not measurable either. Right. It's very subjective.
Right. And that's not bad. I'm not saying like don't do that.
Yes, still do that. But...
Don't do that everything, but it's just like, all right, I could see the benefits of trying this, especially if it has this one particular set we had also improve sleep, which you have a really hard time with. So it was one of those things that as I was thinking about it, is this a good choice or is this not? I realized, well, if I don't ever make these investments, we'll never find out. And this one might not pay off, but if I switch from never buying something if I don't know the outcome is going to be good, like never investing, then we're just going to stay where we are. Yeah. And so I'm not telling you like go out and spend all your money, right? Just pay lots of money for random stuff, right?
Yeah, don't go into debt.
Right? Like budget yourself. But as an entrepreneur, part of that budget is, I can't even say like don't go into debt 100% as an entrepreneur, but I am generally, I definitely would say like I am on the side of bootstrapping things in general. Yeah. Like, I mean, technically taking on investors is going into debt.
I guess that's true.
But in any case, or going into debt after a fashion, right? I mean, there's some ways that they're on the hook for that. There's some ways that you're on the hook for it. So, anyway, but yeah, generally, I'm in favor of bootstrapping or whatnot. But you should figure out, like, you should have a piece of your budget that you can use to reinvest in your business, and specifically reinvest in yourself, like upgrading your ability to work better. And a lot of times people think about skills, but like investing in your mental health, physical health, all of these things are just as important. Investing in your physical health, we learned, is a key thing.
Yeah, so you don't have to have surgery and get laid out for a year.
Yeah. Jeez. So anyway, this is all to say.
Video now.
This is a super long video. Anyway, this is all to say, right, that, a business tip is start a budget for investing in yourself.
And try things, right? It may not be like you said, not every single thing is going to have all of the return on your investment, but that act of trying things will help you keep momentum.
Right.
And it does have that psychological effect of getting you more invested in yourself. And if you don't try anything, you'll never find out if there is something. So at least you found out that, okay, well, that thing didn't work. So if this is still an issue, then I need to try something else.
Right. And budget, I think also as you're creating a budget for investing in yourself, make sure that budget includes that you'll be able to invest in a lot of things. Like, don't invest all your savings into one thing,
commercial. Right?
One commercial, exactly. Right? Budget for the fact that it might take several investments to figure out what works for you and what doesn't, what has more results. So factor that in.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you for those who came in and viewed the video. And also just join us, subscribe, so that we can have more people here, 8 a.m. Central live stream. And we'd love to have, more comments, more questions. We had people asking us about meditation, so we did a video on meditation that people seem to appreciate. And we'd love to have more of that stuff. So if you're watching later, leave comments down below, or again, show up in live stream to get the to have live answers to your questions. So
yay, because we're real people.
It's true.
It's amazing.
All right. Poke, poke. All right. Until tomorrow, make big changes, one small habit at a time.